Hi, welcome everyone to another episode of Let's Talk Special Economic Zones. I'm your host, Ainsley Brown. This will be our last episode for 2023. And we're going to make it a special one. We're going to cover the top five, I almost said top 10, top five trends that we expect to see in zones in 2024. These are not in any particular order of importance. They're all important in their own ways. The first one I'll touch on is actually global taxation. And before I get into that, and this is critical for the understanding of why this is important to zones, special economic zones, whether you call them free zones, industrial parts, export zones, or export areas, or foreign trade zones, whatever you want to call it, same thing. It is a designated area whereby certain rules apply, particularly modified from the regular economy. In particular, you can focus in area of incentives, tax breaks that are given. One particular one, in fact, this is probably the universal one, which is a break on customs duties. Any, raw materials or building materials, inputs into production that go into the zone are, brought in duty free as long as they remain in the zone. And that tends to be the universal tax incentive that's offered or tax break that's offered right across the board in these things around the world. Now, in terms of global taxation, we have the OECD's inclusive framework, specifically Pillar 2, or the global corporate minimum income tax of 15%. We're seeing that, that treaty is signed and people are implementing. And, the thing about that treaty is that it only takes a handful of key countries to implement, which they're either have already implemented or are in the process of implementing, because these are the key countries where foreign direct investment comes from. We're talking about the EU countries, Germany, France, for example, the US, which is not really part of this agreement, but they're part top FDI, China. Um, those countries are the top FDI countries, and they're already making moves, except for the US, for example, to implement this. But there's a slight little wrinkle that we need to be watching out for, and that is with the UN. The UN has declared and just recently had a vote at the end of 2023 here around global taxation. So there could be a counter treaty or a parallel treaty happening. And we have to figure out how that's going to be treated and how that's going to work. Um, we're basically led by the developing world to say that we're not satisfied with the inclusive framework by the OECD. It wasn't inclusive enough, or it was too coercive, I suppose. So that sorting out that is going to be an interesting one for zones, particularly zones who one of the big areas that they offer tax incentives is corporate income tax relief, many of which are below that 15% minimum. If they're above it, it doesn't really matter. In addition, there's a threshold of 750 million euros in terms of investments or revenues that a company, if it generates that, it falls into the threshold. If it doesn't, if it's below that, globally, then it doesn't. So countries that attract very small FDI, the OECD's inclusive framework may not apply to them because they're who they attract is small. But then therein also lies a problem because you're kind of bound or limiting your growth potential by only being able to attract small types of investments to your country. But that clash between the OECD, UN is something that we're going to have to be looking out for. Second one is climate change and its devastating impacts on the economy, particularly supply chains. We're seeing issues with the Panama Canal, which is cascading and having impacts also on the Suez Canal because now ships that have diverted from the Panama Canal are they're causing congestion in the Suez Canal. So there is that. We've seen where even the Suez is in danger. When sandstorms happen, it can cause issues with the ship's navigation, leading to literally a ship hitting a bridge or hitting or blocking the canal, which we've seen happen recently. But also you see where the Amazon, low water levels are there as well, and that's a key artery for trade in South America. We're seeing in the Rhine in Europe, a major artery in Europe, in Germany, particularly, and other rivers that there are low water line levels in Europe. Also, the mighty Mississippi in the United States, a central artery of trade in the United States for quite some time, going back to even um, Mesoamerican times. And that's gonna have an impact on zones. So that's something to watch out for. It also represents an opportunity, as I covered in one episode, to deploy mitigating strategies and attract certain types of investments. A number three is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, particularly around large language models and yeah, the generative AI, chat GPTs and chatbots and all of these different things. It's having a disruptive effect. It's raising productivity, so and that's also disruptive, but it's also destroying jobs. It's getting rid of jobs. And I'm not trying to be alarmist. I'm just, facing the facts. The um it's not going to get rid of all jobs. That's the thing. People tend to go in these absolute terms. No, what may happen, and I'm using basic ratio here. I'm not saying this is a universal thing. I'm saying perhaps a job or something that took 10 people to do or 5 people to do, now it is only one person that's needed to do it, right? So these things are being disrupted. It's also shifting around jobs, shifting around investments where people um, say, you know, they would have outsourced certain things to one jurisdiction. Now they can outsource it to another jurisdiction because that jurisdiction now has gone heavily into AI and they're using it as a tool. So they're more attractive to them. So they may send it there. So there is that. But then there's also AI in manufacturing and robotics and all these different things. Again, it's going to be disruptive, not eliminating jobs totally. It's not going to be us versus machines. It's not a Terminator, um, to use a movie metaphor type of situation. It will just reduce, but then simultaneously will be improving productivity. So we have to look at that side of things as well. And with that disruption, and I'll cover another one is education and training. This is a big area that you're going to need retooling, reskilling of workers. And one of the big questions is who's to pay for that? And people are looking to government, people are looking to private sector. I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's both. Both will have to step up to the plate and pitch in. The ability to train is a major investment attractor um, of zones and of an economy generally speaking. So the ability to retrain a workforce very quickly um, will become a major differentiator for zones going forward, I believe. And the final one I'm going to touch, number five, is geopolitics. that's raising its ugly head right around the world, whether it's wars, Russia, Ukraine, for example, Israel going into the Gaza Strip, taking on Hamas. There's a whole host of geopolitical challenges that are not resolved. You see Venezuela and Guyana in a border dispute. These all have knock-on effects. We live in a global world, so it's going to have a knock-on effect. In addition, there is also things such as the use of industrial policy. That's come back. It went out of fashion for a while, but it's back. It's not a curse word anymore, industrial policy. People are going to be using this for geopolitical reasons. You see the attempt to decouple away from China by the United States. Moving manufacturing away from the United States to its friends, and the rise of friendshoring. That's taking nearshoring and adding a geopolitical spin on it. We also see the use of climate, whereby climate carbon trading, and also carbon border adjustment mechanisms, which the EU has now implemented. That's another geopolitical sphere, which others may copy or get into. In addition to that, there is also, or I should say, the weaponization of climate change, and also the supplier due diligence. There are a variety of schemes that are around in terms of looking at suppliers, ensuring that there's no slave labor within your supply chain. There's no forced labor, things like that, or certain practices, other types of negative practices. The EU, Germany, others have implemented these things, and it's going to have a cascading effect. Of course, these are not exclusive to zones, but definitely will impact zones. Just as a bonus, I'm going to throw in another one, and that is and I should have put this as the top, I guess, the top six, not five, but bonus, the moratorium on the electronic transactions at the WTO is set to expire December 31st. And what that is, in the early days of the internet in the early 90s, didn't know what this internet thing was going to be. So they put a moratorium on the assessment of customs duties on um, electronic transactions, e-commerce, and things like that. It's set to expire. This doesn't mean that suddenly overnight you're going to have duties assessed or put on, because I don't think anyone has a mechanism for that yet. However, what it does, it opens that discussion if this moratorium expires. If it expires without renewal, and it barely got renewed last time for a year. Several countries like India were objecting to its renewal. If this doesn't get renewed, take a look at e-commerce being taxed in some way in terms of electronic transactions. Likewise, it could impact BPO, particularly call centers. So it's something to look out for as a bonus. So if you like this episode, please like, share, subscribe. If you want to see me do a particular topic, just leave me a comment down below. And Merry Christmas and have a Happy New Year. See you in 2024. Bye for now.